Can you break down for us really what's going on in Syria? Because everyone's acting like everyone in our government, even some Republicans, oh, this is amazing. Rebels have taken over Syria. Assad's a class one douchebag. No, he's killed tens of thousands of his own people.
That's actually a CIA term. I've seen that in cable traffic. Class one douchebag, yeah. Versus class two.
Dictator extraordinaire. He flees to Russia. I guess he has asylum there. But the people who took over aren't necessarily good guys. Can you give us a sense of what's happening there?
Oh, Lord have mercy. So it's a mess. Let's just start with that. So at the end of the day, there are lots of different clans and religions and tribes and all kinds of people where Syria for centuries has been this kind of mixing bowl of all these different kinds of people. And that's created all kinds of conflict. The Ottoman Empire controlled it through the early 1900s. It collapses in World War I. France takes over this region. They have it officially and unofficially until 1970, more or less. That's when the Assad family takes control. And they've basically governed that place for the past, 60, 50, whatever years with an iron fist to try to keep down all of these different competing tribes and clans and religions. All right. So that gets us to this point, which is these rebels that were based in the northwestern part of Syria swept through and taken over the joint. The thing is, this rebel group called the HTS rebel group, along with another rebel group also in the northwest, both of them are backed by Turkey. Okay, so what do the Turks want? What does President Erdogan of that country want? Well, he's got about 2 million Syrian refugees in his country. He wants them out. Get out of here. But he needs Damascus in that country to be calm to then kick all the people out because he doesn't want them anymore. Also, Europe has millions of these same refugees, and they would actually, probably not as bluntly as Erdogan would say, but they want them out too, at least the conservatives in Europe. So you got a lot of people also in other places, a lot of Syrians who have left the civil war that started back in 2011, now over 10 years. Everybody wants to send these Syrians home. So that's what these rebels are promising to do, is to create stability. But what do we know about these? There are lots of rebel groups, by the way. This latest rebel group, the HTS, now they are absolutely connected to both al-Qaeda, ISIS, or their ideology. In fact, earlier this week, the now acting prime minister of Syria, he delivered a speech and a conversation with a bunch of folks in Damascus. Sitting next to him were two flags. One was the flag of Syria. The other was the flag that is often used by Sunni Islamic jihadists, which is the flag that talks about, it's one of the key pillars of Islam, which is God is the only God and Muhammad is his prophet. So that flag sitting next to a guy, part of a movement that has been a Salafi or Sunni extremist al-Qaeda ISIS group, that makes a lot of people nervous. Yeah, go figure. So that's why the Christians, the small numbers of Christians in Syria, as well as the Kurdish people up in the north eastern part of Syria, which is where we are at, and lots of others, like they're very nervous. And that's why the Israelis are going in and blowing up all the Syrian military gear to make sure that these rebels don't have stuff to blow up anybody else, certainly the Israelis. It's a mess now. But the question that I think most of us need to be wrestling with is, why are we there? Why do we have 1,000 people based in the northeastern part of Syria right now? Why do we have Kurdish-backed rebels on our side? What's the point? Well, historically, the argument, back in 2013 and 14, when Obama was president, was we need to kick Assad out of government. Well, now the argument is we need to stay there to prevent ISIS or Sunni extremism from becoming dominant. Well, oopsie doopsie, the new guys running Damascus, they're Islamic radicals. They're the Sunni nationalists. So what the point is our mission there in Syria at this way? It's minimal. So President Erdogan has already started, and his rebels have already started to attack our rebels. Now the question becomes, at what point is he going to attack U.S. service members? That's the big risk. President Erdogan, I think, has made that not so subtle risk or assessment or threat this week and last week. Our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, just went over there to try to get Erdogan to say, hey, we're not going to attack your people. They're going to work it out. Bottom line, Donald Trump says we should get out. I agree with him. Let the Turks take over the anti-ISIS mission, although ISIS guys are running Damascus now. So I don't even know what the hell is going on there. But the point is, that's a wreck. So I think, one drop of American blood over this fight is not worth it. But we do have some interest in trying to take care of the people that we've worked with, called the Kurdish people. We should probably try to make sure they don't get slaughtered by all these ISIS guys. That makes sense. and also work with like the Jordanians and the Rockies to make sure that this extremism doesn't drip back into their countries. That makes sense. And then, of course, we've got our friends in Israel. We want to make sure that they don't get slaughtered by yet another group of Islamists who want to kill them. So I think that there are ways to manage this conflict. I don't think we need thousands of our U.S. soldiers, boots on the ground, to solve it.
Jeez. Okay. So speaking of escalating conflict, there was a report that came out by ABC News that in 2.5 years of war, 1 million Ukrainian soldiers have died and hundreds of thousands have lost limbs. And now Ukraine is sending drones to Syrian Islamic rebels. What the hell? I mean, talk about a complicated situation and making it somehow more complex. I mean, it's what's going on with all this?
Yeah, so this is a disaster. But here's how we need to unpack this. Back in 2022, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin said that the goal of ours in Syria or in Ukraine is to degrade the Russian military and the Russian government. Again, let me just repeat that. The goal of being involved in Ukraine is to create a meat grinder, a war of attrition, such that we destroy the Russian state and the Russian military. That was the goal. So what we are now learning is that a part of that is we're going to have all this money, all this war material and drones. We're giving this stuff to Ukraine. And Ukraine is then taking that plus our intelligence and going all around the world to try to destroy the Russian military, to try to degrade, just like Secretary Austin said that we would do. We're not doing it directly. We're using the Ukrainians as our proxy force to do that. So what do we know? We know that they're doing that in two places. We learned this week that the Ukrainians are sending their drone personnel and trainers and about 150 drones to Islamic fighters. These are al-Qaeda, straight up ideologically aligned crazy people, radical Islamists. Our money and our Ukrainian fighters are now going over and training these Syrian radicals, these Islamists. That is in addition to the fact what you and I talked about over the summer, which is that Ukraine is doing the same thing in the Sahel of Africa, the central part of Africa. So Ukraine is sending their drones and their trainers to work with the Islamic radicals in Africa to try to destroy the Russian military forces that are operating in countries like Burkina Faso and Niger and the rest of it. So we've got this expanding war from not just Ukraine, but this broader goal of trying to weaken the Russian state. And they're doing it not only inside of Ukraine, but also around the world. And if this seems just too crazy to be true, the Ukrainian government itself, its own military, has acknowledged that this is what they're doing. It's been reported in the Kiev Post, amongst others. Their deputy chief of military intel has acknowledged this to the British press. So this isn't some sort of conspiracy theory. So that's what is happening. This war is going global. And again, getting back to the drone story in this country, would it be so hard to believe that the Russians or one of their friends might be doing this to screw with us because we're doing this to them in places like Syria and Africa? It's not a stretch at all. So that's why this war in Ukraine, amongst many reasons, is so horrific. And I think you led with one of the most important, which is there are 100,000+ Ukrainian men who are dead. We talked about this before. But we're also learning, Reuters news service, Bloomberg, and others have reported this week that they've got about 95,000 Ukrainian men who have deserted because they don't want to fight anymore. They're trying to get into Romania and Poland. These are poor men, and mostly in their 40s and 50s, by the way. They don't want to die anymore. They want this war over. So that's why this war is just such a disaster, for the disaster of the Ukrainian people, Ukrainian men, now spreading this drone stuff to Islamic radicals in Africa and the Middle East through a proxy. It's just a disaster. When is January? Where's Donald Trump in this? It's crazy. Ah.